The first attack came on a Tuesday morning. The Vectari warships appeared in the sky above New Eden Colony like dark clouds that brought death instead of rain. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human settlement below with cold, calculating eyes. His species had conquered 17 worlds. They had broken the backs of 6 different civilizations. The humans, he believed, would be no different. "Scan for military installations," he ordered his crew. The results came back quickly. There was a small security force, perhaps 200 officers with basic weapons, no heavy artillery, no orbital defense platforms, no battleships hiding behind the moon. New Eden was a farming colony of 50,000 people. They grew food for other human worlds. They raised families. They built small homes with gardens. "This will be easy," Zethkar said to his second-in-command. "The humans spread themselves too thin. They colonize without defending. They trust in peace while we prepare for war." He gave the order to begin the invasion. The first wave of Vectari soldiers dropped from the sky in armored pods. They landed in the fields outside the main settlement. Each soldier stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. Their weapons could cut through metal walls. Their training was brutal and complete. They expected the humans to run. They expected screaming and chaos and easy victory. What they found was something else entirely. Farmer Marcus Webb was working in his cornfield when the pods fell from the sky. He was 63 years old. He had bad knees and a beard that needed trimming. He had spent 40 years growing crops on 3 different worlds. When he saw the alien soldiers emerging from their landing craft, he did not run. He did not scream. He walked calmly to his barn. Inside the barn, behind the old tractor, Marcus kept a hunting rifle that his grandfather had given him. It was a simple weapon, nothing fancy, but Marcus had been shooting since he was 6 years old. He had killed wolves on Mars. He had defended his crops from raiders on Kepler Station. He had survived things that would make young men cry. He loaded the rifle. He walked back outside. He found a good position behind his water tank. The first Vectari soldier never saw him. The bullet took it right between its 4 eyes. The creature fell like a stone. The other soldiers turned toward the sound. They were confused. Their scanners had shown no military presence in this area, just one old man on a farm. Marcus fired again. Another soldier dropped. "Contact, we have contact," a Vectari sergeant shouted into his communicator. "One hostile with primitive projectile weapon." They returned fire. Energy beams cut through the air. They burned Marcus's barn to ash. They melted his tractor into slag, but Marcus was already moving. He knew his land better than anyone. He knew every ditch and every hill and every place where a man could hide and shoot. He killed 4 more soldiers before they finally brought him down. Admiral Zethkar received the report with annoyance. One farmer had killed 6 of his elite soldiers. It was embarrassing, but it was also meaningless. One old man could not stop an invasion. He ordered more troops to land. Across New Eden, the same scene played out in different ways. The Vectari expected civilians to surrender. They expected the humans to fall on their knees and beg for mercy. Their psychological profiles said that humans were soft. Humans cared too much about their lives. Humans would not fight unless they had military training. The profiles were wrong. In the town of Riverside, a group of miners used their drilling equipment to collapse a bridge just as Vectari transport vehicles were crossing. 27 enemy soldiers died in the fall. The miners had planned it in minutes, using nothing but hand signals and their knowledge of the terrain. In the settlement of Green Hills, a retired engineer named Sandra Chen used her knowledge of chemistry to create explosive devices from farming supplies. She had learned the basics from her father, who had been a demolitions expert. The rest she figured out on her own. She planted the devices along the main road. When the Vectari patrol walked past, they disappeared in a cloud of fire and smoke. In the forest near Hope Springs, A hunting club of 12 men and women set up ambush positions. They had no military training. They were teachers and doctors and shop owners who gathered every weekend to track game and practice shooting. But they knew how to shoot. They knew how to move quietly through the woods. They knew how to work together without speaking. They killed over 40 Vektari soldiers in 3 hours before fatting back into the wilderness. Admiral Zethkar watched the casualty reports come in with growing disbelief. His forces had taken more losses in 6 hours than they had in their entire campaign against the Vendorian Empire. And they were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting farmers and miners and old people. "What is wrong with these humans?" he demanded. "Why do they not surrender?" His science officer had no answer. The data made no sense. Civilian populations were supposed to be easy targets. They were supposed to panic and flee. They were not supposed to fight back with such ferocity. On the ground, the Vektari soldiers were learning a hard lesson. Every house could hide an enemy. Every civilian could be carrying a weapon. The humans used everything they had: kitchen knives, hunting bows, improvised explosives, power tools converted into deadly weapons. A mechanic turned his welding torch into a flamethrower. A butcher used his meat cleaver to terrible effect. A grandmother with a crossbow defended her granddaughter from a doorway. One Vektari squad entered a school building, expecting to find cowering children. Instead, they found a principal named James Morton with a fire axe and 17 years of frustration. He had dealt with difficult parents and budget cuts and bureaucratic nonsense for nearly 2 decades. He was not afraid of aliens with guns. He killed 2 of them before they could react. The teachers fought alongside him with whatever they could find: chairs, fire extinguishers. One math teacher threw acid from the science lab at an alien soldier's face. The art teacher swung a heavy sculpture like a club. The gym teacher tackled a Vektari soldier and wrestled its weapon away. The squad retreated. They had been trained to fight armies. They had not been trained to fight teachers who would rather die than let harm come to their students. The children escaped through a back tunnel that the janitor had been using for smoking breaks. He led them himself, carrying the smallest ones when their legs got tired. Every single one of them made it to safety. By the end of the first day, Admiral Zethkar had lost 800 soldiers. He controlled less than 5% of the colony. His troops were afraid to enter buildings. They were afraid to walk down streets. They were afraid of every shadow and every window. He called for reinforcements. News of the attack reached Earth within hours. The military began mobilizing, but the nearest warships were 3 weeks away. The colonies would have to survive on their own until help arrived. Most military analysts expected New Eden to fall within days. They expected the other colonies to surrender once they heard about the invasion. They began preparing evacuation plans and surrender terms. They did not understand what was about to happen. On New Eden, the survivors of the first day's fighting began to organize. They shared weapons and supplies. They established communication networks using old radio equipment and messenger runners. They identified leaders who could coordinate resistance. Some were former soldiers. Most were not. But all of them were angry and determined and ready to fight. And they prepared for war. Maria Santos was a grandmother of 4. She had spent 30 years working as a nurse. She had gentle hands and a soft voice and cookies always ready for visitors. She also had a hidden room in her basement where she kept emergency supplies. Her husband had been a worrier. He had prepared for every disaster he could imagine. When he died 5 years ago, Maria had kept up the tradition. When the Vektari soldiers came to her neighborhood, they expected easy targets: old people, young children, families who would surrender to save their lives. Maria met them at her front door with a smile. She offered them water. She seemed friendly and harmless. The soldiers relaxed. They lowered their weapons slightly. They thought they had found someone who would cooperate. They did not notice the other grandmothers gathering behind them. They did not notice the kitchen knives and gardening tools. They did not notice the trap until it was too late. 12 soldiers entered that neighborhood. None of them came out alive. Maria cleaned the blood off her hands and went to check on her neighbors. There was much work to do. The war was only beginning. The second colony to be attacked was called Prosperity. It was a mining world, rich in metals and minerals that the growing human civilization needed desperately. The Vectari chose it because they needed resources for their own expansion. They also chose it because they believed miners would be too tired and too poor to fight back. They were very wrong. The miners of Prosperity had come from hard lives on Earth. They had worked in dangerous conditions for low pay. They had fought for every scrap of respect they ever received. Many of them had criminal records. Many of them had spent time in prison. Some had been gang members. Some had been street fighters. None of them were soft people. None of them were gentle people. When the Vectari ships appeared in their sky, the miners did not wait for orders. They did not wait for leadership. They simply grabbed their tools and went to war. Drilling lasers became weapons. Mining explosives became bombs. Tunnel vehicles became armored transports. Heavy lifting equipment became siege weapons. Within hours, the miners had transformed their workplace into a fortress. A foreman named Viktor Kozlov took charge of the defense. He was a large man with hands like stones and a voice like thunder. He had spent 20 years underground. He had survived 3 tunnel collapses. He had broken up more fights than he could count. He knew every tunnel and every shaft and every place where enemies could be trapped. "They want our mines," he shouted to his workers. "Then we will bury them in them." The Vectari landed their troops near the main entrance. They expected to walk in and take control. Instead, they found themselves facing a wall of industrial equipment. Mining drills tore through their armor. Rock crushers turned their vehicles into scrap. Ventilation fans blew toxic dust into their faces. The aliens fell back. They tried a different approach. They sent scouts through secondary tunnels. The scouts disappeared. Some fell into hastily dug pits. Some triggered explosive traps. Some simply vanished, pulled into the darkness by miners who had learned to move without sound. Victor organized his people into teams. Each team had a section to defend. Each team knew the tunnels in their area better than any map could show. They communicated through tapping on pipes, a code they invented in hours and learned in minutes. By nightfall, the Vectari commander requested permission to withdraw. Admiral Zethkar denied the request. He could not afford another failure. The battle for Prosperity continued for 2 weeks. The miners gave ground slowly, making the aliens pay for every inch. They flooded tunnels. They collapsed ceilings. They created dead ends and false passages that led enemy soldiers into killing zones. Military analysts watching from Earth could not believe what they were seeing. Untrained civilians were holding off a professional army. They were using tactics that no military academy taught. They were improvising and adapting and winning. A Vectari soldier's report was later recovered from the battlefield. It described the miners as demons who came from the walls. It described attacks from directions that should not exist. It described a fear that no training could prepare for. The soldier had been a veteran of 3 campaigns. He had never been afraid before. The soldier who wrote the report did not survive to send it. On Prosperity, Viktor Kozlov became a legend. He led raids that seemed impossible. He escaped traps that should have killed him. He was everywhere at once, appearing from tunnels that enemy maps said did not exist. His workers followed him without question. They would have followed him into fire. "You cannot defeat men who built their own world," he told his workers. "We made these tunnels with our hands. We know them like we know our own hearts. These aliens think they can take what we built. Let them try." The Vectari tried. They failed. By the end of the second week, they had lost over 1,000 soldiers on Prosperity alone. They controlled nothing except the area immediately around their landing zone, and even that area was under constant attack. Word spread quickly between the colonies. Stories of resistance became fuel for more resistance. A grandmother killing soldiers with a kitchen knife, miners burying an army, farmers holding their ground against overwhelming odds, teachers protecting their students, children escaping to safety through secret passages. Each story added to the legend. Each victory proved that the aliens could be beaten. On a colony called Serenity, a group of teenagers decided they would not wait to be attacked. They formed a scout network, watching the skies and reporting enemy movements. They used gaming headsets for communication. They used drone racing skills to operate improvised surveillance devices. They used social media tactics to spread information and coordinate responses. Their leader was a 17-year-old girl named Alice Park. She had won 3 drone racing championships. She had also built her own communication equipment from spare parts. She was small and quiet, and the kind of person adults often ignored. When the adults asked why teenagers should be trusted with such important work, she had a simple answer. "We've been training for this our whole lives," she said. "Every video game, every simulation, every online battle. We know how to coordinate, we know how to adapt, we know how to win. You think we've just been wasting time? We've been learning." The adults were skeptical, but they had no better options. They let the teenagers help. Alice's network provided information that saved thousands of lives. They spotted enemy landing zones before troops arrived. They tracked patrol routes and found gaps in enemy coverage. They created maps of safe passages through occupied territory. They identified weak points in enemy defenses. They predicted enemy movements before the enemy made them. When Vektari soldiers captured Alice's best friend, she organized a rescue mission. 23 teenagers, armed with improvised weapons and electronic jammers, hit an enemy camp at night. They used darkness and confusion as their allies. They moved like ghosts through enemy lines. They freed 37 prisoners, including Alice's friend. They lost no one. The military analysts on Earth stopped predicting easy victories for the Vektari. They started studying the civilian resistance with new eyes. They started asking questions that had never been asked before. What made humans so difficult to conquer? Why did civilians fight when surrender was so easy? What drove ordinary people to such extraordinary courage? The answers would reshape everything they thought they knew about humanity. The first Vektari commander to attempt negotiations was named Colonel Vethnos. He was a veteran of 6 campaigns. He had conquered 3 worlds. He had never faced an enemy like the humans. After losing half his forces on a colony called Harmony, he sent a message to the human leadership. He offered terms. Surrender now and the humans would be treated fairly. Continue to resist and the Vektari would show no mercy. Resistance would only bring more death. The human response came from a city council president named Thomas Wright. He was a small man with glasses and a quiet voice. Before the invasion, he had spent his days handling building permits and budget meetings. He had never held a weapon in his life. His response was simple: "Come and take us if you can." Colonel Vethnos was insulted by the response. He ordered a full assault on Harmony's main city. His remaining troops advanced in tight formation, expecting house-to-house fighting. They found empty streets, silent buildings, no resistance at all. "It's a trap," his lieutenant warned. "Of course it's a trap," Vethnos replied, "but we have no choice. We must show these humans that they cannot win." His troops entered the city. For 10 minutes nothing happened. They moved deeper, growing more confident. Perhaps the humans had fled after all. Perhaps they had finally learned their lesson. Then the city itself came alive. Every building had been prepared. Explosive charges, automated weapons built from construction equipment, traps in floors and walls and ceilings. The city was not a place to defend. It was a weapon designed to kill. Colonel Vethnos watched his army die on 100 screens. His soldiers were brave. They were well-trained. They were completely outmatched by an enemy they could not see or understand. The survivors retreated to their landing zone. They found it surrounded by armed civilians, farmers, shop owners, children with slingshots loaded with explosive balls, old men with hunting rifles, women with kitchen knives. The colonel's last transmission was recorded by Vektari Command. "These are not civilians," he said. "They are all soldiers, every single one of them." He died 30 seconds later, killed by a librarian with a hunting bow. Admiral Zethkar finally understood his mistake. He had thought of the human colonies as soft targets. He had seen farmers and miners and teachers and assumed they would be easy to break. He had not understood the truth. Humans did not divide themselves the way other species did. Soldiers and civilians were not separate categories. Every human carried the potential for violence. Every human had ancestors who had survived through fighting. The peaceful farmer had a rifle passed down from generations of hunters. The gentle grandmother had learned to protect her family in hard times. The quiet teacher had the instinct to defend children against any threat. The teenage gamer had trained for warfare without knowing it. Peace was not weakness. Peace was a choice. And when the choice was taken away, the humans remembered who they really were. Admiral Zethkar requested more reinforcements. He received a troubling reply. Other Vektari commanders had attacked other human colonies. All of them reported the same problems: massive casualties, civilian resistance that made occupation impossible, losses that no strategic gain could justify. For the first time in Vektari history, an invasion was failing against a species they had thought would be easy prey. On Earth, the military analysts stopped preparing evacuation plans. They started studying the civilian resistance instead. They recorded tactics that no manual had taught. They documented weapons that no factory had built. They witnessed courage that no training could create. Something new was being born in the fires of alien invasion. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to fight. 3 weeks had passed since the first Vektari attack. The human military was still days away. The colonies were still on their own, but the tide of battle had already turned. On New Eden, the original target, human resistance, had pushed the alien forces into a shrinking pocket around their landing zone. The farmers and teachers and grandmothers had become an army. They did not wear uniforms. They did not follow military protocol, but they fought with a coordination that amazed professional soldiers watching from orbit. Maria Santos, the grandmother who had killed 12 soldiers on the first day, now commanded a network of neighborhood defenders. She moved between positions on an old bicycle, carrying supplies and messages. Her gentle voice gave orders that warriors followed without question. "The key is patience," she told her volunteers. "We do not need to win quickly. We only need to keep fighting. Time is on our side." She was right. Every day the Vektari spent on New Eden cost them soldiers and supplies. Every day brought human reinforcements closer. Every day, the aliens grew weaker while the humans grew stronger. Maria organized food distribution so no one went hungry. She set up medical stations using supplies from her nursing years. She created rotation schedules so fighters could rest. She thought of everything a military commander would think of, even though she had never worn a uniform. "How do you know all this?" a young fighter asked her one evening. Maria smiled. "I raised 4 children and ran a hospital ward for 15 years. Coordinating people is coordinating people, whether they're patients or soldiers." Admiral Zethkar watched his invasion collapse with bitter understanding. He had underestimated his enemy. He had not understood what he was fighting. But understanding came too late to change the outcome. The final phase of civilian resistance began when human warships appeared in the New Eden system. Admiral Chen Li commanded the relief force. She was a veteran of peacekeeping missions and border patrols. She had never fought an invasion before. What she found amazed her. "Report status of the colony," she ordered as her ships approached. The response came from 100 different voices: farmers and miners, teachers and doctors, children who had become scouts and grandmothers who had become generals. "We have contained enemy forces to 3 landing zones," a calm voice reported. "Estimated enemy casualties at 60%, civilian casualties at 12%. We are ready to support your assault." Admiral Chen could not believe the numbers. Civilians had defeated a professional army. They had done what military planners said was impossible. "Who was in command down there?" she asked. There was a pause. Then multiple voices answered at once, each claiming leadership of different resistance groups. Farmers led farmers. Miners led miners. Neighborhoods organized themselves and coordinated with other neighborhoods. There was no single commander. There was no central authority. There was only the collective will of 50,000 humans who refused to be conquered. Admiral Chen smiled. "Then I will coordinate with all of you, prepare for final operations." The liberation of New Eden took 3 days. Human warships engaged the Vectari fleet while ground forces dropped to support civilian fighters. The aliens fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outflanked. Their own conquered territory became a trap, surrounded by enemies who knew every street and building. The professional soldiers worked alongside the civilian fighters. They were impressed by what the colonists had accomplished. They were also humbled by it. These people had held the line without training, without weapons, without support. Admiral Zethkar tried to retreat. His ships made a run for open space, hopping to escape and report what had happened. He never made it. His flagship was disabled by a barrage of missiles. When human Marines boarded the vessel, they found the admiral in his command chair, staring at screens filled with casualty reports. "How?" he asked the humans who came to capture him. "You are farmers, teachers, children. How did you defeat warriors?" A Marine sergeant named Rodriguez answered him. She was 42 years old. Before the war, she had been a physical therapist. She had joined the military 6 months ago, when the colonies first reported strange signals in deep space. "You don't understand humans," she said. "You saw peaceful people and thought we were weak, but we are peaceful by choice, not by nature. Threaten our families, our homes, our children, and we remember what we really are." "And what is that?" the admiral asked. Rodriguez smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "Survivors. We survived ice ages and plagues. We survived world wars and nuclear terror. We survived ourselves. You are just the latest thing trying to kill us. You won't be the last." Admiral Zethkar was taken prisoner. His officers were captured or killed. His army, what remained of it, surrendered on every colony it had attacked. The war was over. The humans had won. The aftermath brought celebrations and studies in equal measure. Military analysts across human space examined what had happened. They interviewed civilians who had become fighters. They documented tactics and weapons and organizational methods that no one had taught. What they found changed everything. Human society, they realized, was uniquely resistant to conquest. Other species separated warriors from civilians. Other species relied on professional armies to protect peaceful populations. Humans did not work that way. Every human community contained people who could fight: hunters and martial artists, veterans and enthusiasts, people who had survived violence and learned from it, people who had never faced danger but carried the potential for resistance in their genes. More importantly, human communities could organize without central command. Neighborhoods defended themselves. Towns coordinated with other towns. Information flowed through networks that had no single point of failure. The Vectari had expected to cut off the head of human resistance and watch the body die. But human resistance had no head. It was a network, a web, a distributed system that could lose any part and keep functioning. A report was published 6 months after the invasion ended. It was titled The Civilian Response Phenomenon: Why Human Colonies Could Not Be Conquered. The report was read by military leaders across the galaxy. Many of them decided that attacking humans was not worth the cost. The report identified several key factors that made human civilians so dangerous. First was what the analysts called latent capability. Every human learned survival skills from childhood. Sports taught teamwork. Games taught strategy. Work taught discipline. By the time humans became adults, they had thousands of hours of training that could be applied to combat. Second was adaptive organization. Humans could form effective groups almost instantly. They did not need orders or hierarchy. They could coordinate through shared understanding and common goals. A group of strangers could become a fighting unit in hours. Third was emotional investment. Humans fought harder for things they loved: their homes, their families, their neighbors. Abstract causes like territory or resources did not motivate them as strongly as personal connections. The Vektari military had focused on objectives. The human civilians had focused on people. On New Eden, life returned to something like normal. Farms were rebuilt. Schools reopened. Children played in streets where soldiers had died. The scars of war faded slowly, but they faded. But things had changed. Maria Santos still baked cookies for her neighbors, but she also taught self-defense classes 3 times a week. Her students ranged from 6 to 90 years old. They learned to fight with whatever was available. They learned to protect their community. "I hope we never need these skills again," she told her class. "But if we do, we will be ready." Across the colony, similar changes took place. Hunting clubs became militia units. Volunteer fire departments added security training to their duties. Schools taught emergency response alongside reading and mathematics. The humans were still peaceful. They still preferred to grow crops and raise families and build better lives. But they had learned a lesson about the galaxy. Peace required strength. Safety required preparation. The next time aliens came to human space, they would find more than farmers and teachers. They would find a civilization that had remembered its fighting spirit. 10 years after the invasion, a memorial was built on New Eden. It honored everyone who had died in the defense of the colony. Military soldiers and civilian fighters stood together in bronze, equal in sacrifice. At the dedication ceremony, Admiral Chen Li gave a speech. She was older now, her hair going gray, but her voice was still strong. "The galaxy thought humans were easy targets," she said. "They saw our farms and schools. They saw our peaceful lives. They thought we were soft." She paused, looking out at the crowd. Farmers and miners, teachers and children, the same people who had fought so hard to save their homes. They learned the truth. We are peaceful because we choose peace. We raise families because we love life. We build instead of destroy because creation is better than destruction. But when our peace is threatened, when our families are in danger, when everything we have built faces destruction, we remember who we are. She raised her hand toward the memorial. "We are the children of survivors. We carry 10,000 years of struggle in our blood. We have faced extinction and overcome it. We have faced ourselves and survived. We are not soft. We are not weak. We are humans, and we will never be conquered." The crowd cheered. Fireworks exploded in the sky above New Eden. Children laughed and ran through streets that had once been battlefields. Far away, on a prison planet, Admiral Zethkar heard about the ceremony. He was serving a life sentence for war crimes. He had plenty of time to think about what had happened. He understood now, finally, what he had faced. Not farmers, not teachers, not civilians. He had faced a species that turned every person into a potential warrior. A civilization that could fight without armies. a people who would rather die than surrender their freedom. He had faced humanity, and humanity had won. The report on civilian resistance was studied by military academies for generations. It changed how humans thought about defense and community. It changed how aliens thought about attacking human worlds. But the real lesson was simpler than any report could capture. Humans were dangerous not because of their weapons or their armies. Humans were dangerous because every single one of them could become a fighter when pushed. Every farmer could become a sniper. Every teacher could become a trap maker. Every grandmother could become a killer of soldiers. Peace was their choice. War was their inheritance. And anyone who tried to take their freedom would learn the difference. 20 years after the invasion, a Vektari diplomat visited New Eden. His species had changed. They no longer sought conquest. They had learned painfully that some species could not be conquered. The diplomat met with Maria Santos. She was 93 now, white-haired and wrinkled, but her eyes were still sharp. She still taught self-defense classes, though her students did most of the physical demonstrations. "I wanted to understand," the diplomat said. "Why did your people fight so hard? You could have surrendered. You could have saved many lives." Maria smiled. It was the same smile she had worn while serving water to soldiers she was about to kill. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "When I was a little girl, my grandmother told me about my great-great-grandmother. She lived through a terrible war on Earth, long before space travel. Her village was attacked. She was just a girl, younger than I was when I heard the story." She paused, remembering. The soldiers thought they could take whatever they wanted from her village. They were wrong. The women and children and old people fought back. They used kitchen tools and farming implements. They used their bare hands when they had nothing else. Many of them died, but many of the soldiers died too, enough that the army decided the village was not worth the cost. The diplomat nodded slowly. "This is how your people have always been." "This is how all people are when you threaten what they love," Maria said. "We are not special. We are just human, and humans do not give up what matters to them, not without a fight." She reached out and patted the diplomat's hand. He flinched slightly at the touch. "Go home," she said kindly. "Tell your people what you have learned. Tell them that we want peace. Tell them that we prefer friendship, but also tell them this." She leaned closer, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Never forget what we can become when peace is no longer an option. Never forget New Eden. Never forget the farmers and teachers who broke your army. Never forget that every human, no matter how peaceful they seem, carries the spirit of warriors within them." The diplomat nodded. He would remember. His people would remember. And the galaxy would never again make the mistake of thinking that human civilians were easy prey. The story of the Vektari invasion passed into legend. Children learned about it in school. Songs were written about the heroes of the resistance. Movies told the stories of farmers and miners and grandmothers who became warriors. Marcus Webb, the farmer who killed 6 soldiers before falling, became a symbol of ordinary courage. A statue of him stood in Riverside, showing an old man with a rifle and a determined expression. Viktor Kozlov retired from mining but never stopped teaching. He traveled between colonies, sharing what he had learned about guerrilla warfare in confined spaces. His students called themselves tunnel rats and practiced the tactics that had saved prosperity. Alice Park went on to design communication systems for the human military. Her teenage scout network became the model for a new branch of military intelligence. She never forgot the friends who had fought beside her, or the one she had rescued from enemy captivity. But Maria Santos was remembered most of all. The grandmother who had killed with a smile, the nurse who had become a general, the old woman who had shown the galaxy what humans were made of. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 98. Thousands attended her funeral. The president of the colony gave a speech. The military sent an honor guard. On her gravestone, they carved a simple message. It was the same thing she had told the Vektari diplomat all those years ago. Humans do not give up what matters to them. The words became a motto, a reminder, a warning to anyone who might forget. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other species read the reports of the Vektari invasion. They studied the casualty figures. They watched the recordings of farmers and teachers fighting like demons. They made notes in their strategic planning documents. They adjusted their threat assessments. They decided that perhaps, maybe, the humans were best left alone. This was the truth the military analysts had discovered when they studied the civilian response. This was the legacy of New Eden and prosperity and harmony, and all the other colonies that had refused to surrender. This was why humanity would endure. Not because of their weapons, not because of their armies. Because every single human carried the fire of resistance in their heart, because they would never, ever give up. And that was the lesson the galaxy learned when aliens attacked human colonies, and human civilians shocked the military analysts. That was the truth that would echo through the ages. That was humanity. Forever unbroken, forever defiant, forever free.